Air superiority is the single most decisive factor in modern warfare. The side that controls the skies gets to dictate the course of the battles below on both land and sea. For 2 long years, Russia has been the dominant force in the air over Ukraine as the Russo-Ukrainian war rages on. But Ukraine might soon be able to tilt the balance in its favor and reclaim the skies from the grip of its oppressor, all thanks to a single weapon system, the F16 Fighting Falcon. The imminent arrival of the F16 fighter jets to Ukraine promises to be a game-changer in the conflict, but only if Ukraine plays its cards right. Now, what do we mean by that? Stick around to find out. First, let's discuss why Ukraine needs the F16 fighter jets in the first place. The answer is simple. As things stand, Ukraine has a modest air fighting force at best. This force is primarily made up of Soviet-era equipment that includes the Sukhoi Su-27 and the Mikoyan MiG-29 twin-engine fighter aircraft. Though these aircraft can be a formidable adversary in the right hands, as Ukraine has already proven, they simply lack the advanced capabilities a modern battlefield demands. To make matters worse, Ukraine's already lackluster air force has been severely depleted since Russia invaded the country on February 24, 2022. According to some estimates, Ukraine has lost over 300 total aircraft during this period, unmanned aerial vehicles included. Ukrainian officials have also acknowledged the difficulties in repairing and replacing the damaged aircraft. In a twisted turn of events, the only country that produces the spare parts for Ukraine's damaged Soviet-era aircraft is Russia, the very same country that damaged those aircraft in the first place. This dependency has severely hampered Ukraine's ability to maintain its air force and has highlighted the urgent need for modernization and diversification of its military assets. That's where the Western-made F-16s come into play. But why F-16s in particular? There are plenty of reasons Ukraine and its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, have been desperately trying to get their hands on these fighter jets since the very beginning of the invasion. You see, the F-16 fighter jets are significantly more adept at targeting and destroying ground targets compared to Ukraine's fleet of Soviet-era aircraft. Their laser-guided precision bombs can wreak havoc on virtually any enemy position with unparalleled accuracy. Besides accuracy, the F-16 will improve the distance and speed at which Ukraine can conduct airstrikes. The F-16 can fly at twice the speed of sound and strike targets on the ground more than 500 miles away. This should allow Ukraine to take out Russia's ground-based defenses more easily. The F-16s are also equipped with more modern electronic systems and better radars. This adds to their ability to detect and engage targets more effectively while also allowing them to be more survivable in hostile airspace. According to some predictions, the F-16 versions sent to Ukraine will be equipped with an upgraded version of the AN/APG-66 radar, which has an air-to-air range larger than 60 miles. Talk about having eyes in the sky. Here's just some of the armaments the F-16 will be equipped with. One M61A1 Vulcan 20mm Gatling-style rotary cannon with over 500 rounds. AN/AAQ-13 and AN/AAQ-14 Lantier navigation and targeting pods. Up to 4 LAU-61, LAU-68, LAU-5003 or LAU-10 rocket pods. Up to 6 air-to-air missiles, including the AIM-9 Sidewinder. Up to 6 air-to-surface missiles, including the AGM-65 Maverick. Up to 4 anti-ship missiles, including the AGM-84 Harpoon. And up to 12 bombs, including the B-83 nuclear bomb. It's also important to note that the F-16, like most Western aircraft, are significantly more pilot-friendly than Soviet-made aircraft. Though this is notable in and of itself, it becomes crucial to the Russo-Ukrainian war, as pilot training is one of the major obstacles Ukraine has to overcome if the F-16s are to make any difference. But more on that later. For now, let's stick to the F-16's pilot friendliness. The F-16 boasts intuitive controls and displays that are designed to reduce pilot workload and enhance situational awareness. Simply put, the F-16 jets are designed to do more with less work. All the controls the pilot needs are easily accessible and logically arranged, allowing the pilot to make split-second decisions in high-stress situations. And the pilots flying over Ukraine are sure to have their fair share of such situations. But there's another crucial reason why Ukraine wants the F-16 fighter jets in particular. As mentioned, these are Western-made jets primarily used by Western air forces, including the NATO countries. For Ukraine, using the F-16s means improved interoperability and compatibility with NATO forces. That's why the country hasn't gone for the Swedish-made Saab JAS-39 Gripen or French-made Dassault Rafale fighter jets. Though also Western-made, these jets are barely used by NATO countries. Of course, mere interoperability and compatibility with NATO countries is far from the end goal. The end goal is for Ukraine to become one of those countries. So what's the wait? Why haven't the F-16s been provided to Ukraine as soon as Zelensky requested them so we could speed this whole process along? Well, remember who Ukraine and the West are dealing with: Russia. Do you really think the Eastern Colossus would sit idly by while Ukraine receives decisive Western weapons and moves closer to NATO? Not a chance. According to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko, the supply of F-16s to Ukraine would carry enormous risks for Western countries involved. He also labeled this transaction a move up the so-called escalation ladder, accusing Western forces of pushing for an escalation scenario. As for Russia, Grushko claims the country will take the F-16 acquisition into account in all its plans and that it has all the necessary means to achieve the set goals. Given how unpredictable Russia is, it shouldn't be surprising that even these vague warnings are taken seriously by Western powers. After all, we're talking about the country that went through with the invasion of Ukraine when virtually the whole world claimed it wouldn't dare. That's why the road of the F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine has been rather slow. But how many of these fighter jets should make their way to Ukraine in the first place? In other words, how many F-16s does Ukraine need to achieve air superiority? If you ask Kyiv, the answer is 200. That's the figure Ukrainian officials mentioned in January 2023. That's also the number that would instantly place Ukraine in the top 5 countries in the world by number of F-16 fighter jets in their inventory. However, if you ask military experts this question, the answer will be much lower, 50% lower to be precise. Around 100 F-16s is the highest figure being bandied around that would give Ukraine air superiority. However, according to some military experts, even 24 F-16s would be enough to make a difference and bolster Ukraine's air power in a meaningful way. But the number of F-16 fighter jets Ukraine will receive doesn't really matter. Not if they don't come with the necessary training, support, and infrastructure to effectively utilize these aircraft. Just look at it this way. Ukraine can receive 1,000 of these aircraft and overtake the US as the country with the most F-16s, but if it lacks the expertise and infrastructure to maintain and operate them, the jets would be little more than expensive decorations. That's why military experts are adamant about one thing. Acquiring F-16 fighter jets won't give Ukraine air superiority over Russia, well, at least not automatically. To reach this endlessly desirable goal of air superiority, Ukraine would first have to lay the groundwork for these efforts. But what does the groundwork refer to in this situation? The first aspect, unsurprisingly, is adequate training. When discussing how many F-16s Ukraine would need to make a difference, a former British Royal Air Force officer said the country would need dozens of competently operated F-16s. Of course, competently operated is the key phrase here, as you can't expect Ukrainian pilots just to hop in the F-16 jets and conquer the skies above. To do that, they must first be trained. And this training doesn't take days or weeks, it takes months. 18 months to be precise, according to Colin Kahl, the Pentagon's former Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and that's the best-case scenario. But why will this training take so long? After all, an average new F-16 pilot should learn the ropes in about 8 months. Well, unfortunately, there are numerous aggravating circumstances when it comes to training Ukrainian pilots. For starters, not all of these pilots are proficient in English, which significantly extends the duration of their training. That's why the pilots sent for the first rounds of training were cherry-picked based on their strong English language skills. It's also important to note that the number of these pilots was quite limited, and this doesn't have to do with their language skills. Ukraine simply couldn't afford to take too many pilots away from the battlefield, which is another factor contributing to the prolonged training process. Other than that, learning a new system can be tough, even for experienced pilots. They must be trained to the point that they can commit the movements to muscle memory. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to act and react quickly and effectively under pressure. For pilots with less experience, the training process is even more challenging, as they first have to familiarize themselves with the F-16 aircraft in a classroom. This part of the training typically lasts about 3 weeks. Over the next month, aspiring F-16 pilots are eased into flying the jet. The training starts with basic daytime flying and moves into nighttime, bad weather, and instrument flying, all technically demanding aspects of flying. Then it's time for the star of the show: air combat. This is where pilots learn to engage in aerial dogfights, employ air-to-air weapon systems, and practice evasive maneuvers. After 6 to 8 weeks of air combat instruction, air-to-ground training ensues. This training takes another 2 months. As you can see, the months are passing by, and we're still in the basic instruction domain. It will take several more months for Ukrainian pilots to learn how to carry out specialized missions and advanced tactics, such as coordinating with ground units and carrying out multi-aircraft missions. Given how complex this training is, it was of vital importance for it to start as early as possible, and luckily, it did. The list of countries pledging to train or already training Ukrainian pilots includes Poland, the US, the UK, Denmark, and the Netherlands. According to reports, the 12 pilots undergoing training in the US are expected to complete their program by May 2024, marking the earliest completion date in the ongoing Ukrainian training initiatives. In contrast, most pilots trained in Europe are not expected to finish until late 2024, despite 10 pilots recently completing their training in the UK. There are also 6 advanced pilots trained in Denmark that could be ready much earlier. But pilots aren't the only personnel trained. Ukrainian ground crews must also learn how to service the aircraft. After all, an average F16 jet is only flyable 25 to 50% of the time. In the meantime, it's being serviced. According to some estimates, each F16 needs about 20 maintenance hours between flights, which explains the need for a well-trained ground crew to keep the jets operational and mission-ready. Also, a huge part of laying the groundwork doesn't even have to do with people. It has to do with, well, the ground. You see, F-16s require smoother runways, centralized bases, and other specialized infrastructure to operate seamlessly. This means that Ukraine has to resurface its existing runways and consolidate bases to accommodate these aircraft. Now, this is a challenging task itself. However, it becomes nearly impossible when you consider it must be carried out without attracting Russia's attention. Russia's unwanted vigilance is another major obstacle to operating the F-16s successfully. At present, Ukraine can only use dispersed airfields and makeshift runways to fly its Soviet-era aircraft. If consolidated F-16 bases were to be used, they would become the primary targets of Russian airstrikes. This leads us to another vital aspect of laying the groundwork for F-16 jets in Ukraine, establishing sufficient air defense systems to protect the F-16 bases. And every defense system dedicated to these bases is a system drawn away from the Ukrainian front lines, which increases the risk of Russian advances in other areas. To make matters worse, defense isn't the only thing Ukraine must consider when it comes to the F-16 jets. The offense is no walk in the park either. You see, most of the Ukrainian existing weapons come from the Soviet era. This means that they can't be fitted on a Western-made aircraft like the F-16. In other words, besides the jets themselves, the Western allies would also have to supply Ukraine with missiles and other weapons for air combat. Fortunately, this process is also underway, with the US supplying Ukraine with the AGM-88 high-speed anti-radiation missiles, HARM, as early as 2022. When fitted on an F-16, these missiles can target and destroy enemy radar installations, helping to suppress enemy air defenses and clear the way for other aircraft. Of course, these missiles are just the beginning. Ukraine also needs advanced air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles, precision-guided munitions, and other modern weapon systems that enhance the F-16's capabilities in various mission scenarios. Only with all these boxes checked, training, infrastructure, defense, and armaments, can Ukraine dream of achieving air superiority over Russia. But given how fiercely the country has been fighting for its sovereignty, this dream is bound to become a reality at some point. So let's see what F-16 fueled air superiority truly means for Ukraine. With the arrival of F-16 jets to Ukraine, the country's offensive and defensive capabilities will receive an immediate boost. This will transform the sky above Ukraine into a highly contested battlefield, forcing Moscow to change its operational strategy and stretch its military resources. In the air, Kyiv would be able to achieve two things almost instantly: securing local air superiority and preventing Russia from maintaining the overall air superiority. As far as local superiority goes, it refers to carving out specific areas where Ukraine can dominate for a few hours or even days. If you're wondering why the local approach, the answer is simple. Even with additional F-16s, the total number of aircraft Russia has outnumbers that of Ukraine several times over. To put this into perspective, all you need to know is that Russia has over 800 fighter aircraft. So even if Ukraine were to receive all of the 200 units it requested, Russia would still have 4 times as many aircraft. However, it's important to note, that despite this massive discrepancy between Russia and Ukraine's air forces, Russia hasn't truly managed to establish foolproof air supremacy over Ukraine since the beginning of the invasion. This surprising failure mostly has to do with poor training and numerous Russian attack aircraft touted as superweapons turning out to be useless in contested airspace. The result? The country's so-called supremacy was patchy at best, which is why we're even discussing a scenario in which Ukraine can take over the skies. Even with its outdated equipment, the Ukrainian Air Force has managed to dent its oppressors' air superiority efforts. So with the addition of the F-16s, Russia can kiss this superiority goodbye. Essentially, the F-16s would make the airspace over Ukraine too dangerous for Russia. Though to be fair, Ukraine has managed to deny Russia air superiority even before the F-16 jets entered the picture. Early in the war, Ukraine managed to shoot down quite a few Russian aircraft, causing the Russian Air Force to stop flying into contested airspace. Given that Russia cowed in the face of Ukraine's old equipment, it's safe to assume the country will be even more cautious when facing a modern and well-equipped Ukrainian Air Force with F-16 fighter jets in its arsenal. Before the F-16s, a Ukrainian aircraft going directly against a Russian aircraft in the air would almost always be considered a suicide mission. Now, with much faster and more maneuverable aircraft, Ukrainian pilots can turn the table on their adversaries. However, the biggest change caused by Ukrainian air superiority wouldn't take place in the air. Instead, the ground and sea battles would benefit the most. Sure, Ukraine won't be able to carry out NATO-style air campaigns immediately, which are known for integrating air power and other military capabilities. However, the country would be able to conduct well-selected precision strikes that could help it blast its way through Russian-held territory. Thanks to the F-16s and cluster rockets Ukraine has previously received, virtually any Russian target in this territory would be in Ukraine's range. This would allow Ukraine to take back some of its territory, which is currently impossible to do on foot. Why? Because Russia has planted landmines in a large portion of the occupied Ukrainian soil, making a land takeover another suicide mission. In this case, Ukrainian troops would die either at the hands of the mines themselves or Russian air attacks targeting them while they try to get over the minefields safely. But using F-16 fighter jets isn't only about attacking the enemy forces, it's also about defending Ukrainian troops. Currently, these troops are often devastated by Russian attack helicopters and fixed-wing glide bombs, but this could all change with the introduction of the F-16. In other words, the F-16 jets might be able to bring much-needed relief to the Ukrainian front lines, as these have been severely shaken up in the past few months. Though the situation at sea is much more advantageous for Ukraine than the one on the ground, the F-16 could help the country seal the deal in the Black Sea. For now, Ukraine has already managed to take out a significant percentage of Russia's Black Sea fleet with existing weapons and a whole host of asymmetric warfare techniques. With F-16 jets, Ukraine almost won't have any need for these innovative techniques. It can simply blast away. Attacking the Black Sea Fleet and the Kerch Bridge, connecting mainland Russia with Crimea with F-16-fired missiles, could even help Ukraine achieve its long-sought-after goal, taking back the Crimean Peninsula. Even without the F-16 jets in the sky, Russia has already pushed its Black Sea bases away from Ukraine. It's also withdrawn most of its vessels from the area, leaving a single ship, according to some reports. Though these moves can be explained by Ukraine's incessant military pressure, some experts also tie them to the imminent arrival of the F-16. This would mean that Russia itself is also well aware of the danger these jets pose to its military operations in the region. However, it's important to note that any significant change in the Russo-Ukrainian war won't happen overnight. Most experts don't see F-16s bringing Ukraine instant air superiority. Instead, they emphasize the importance of these jets in the long run. For starters, the F-16s will allow Ukraine to continue to have an air presence as the country's Soviet-era aircraft are being phased out due to aging, wear and tear, and attrition. They will also allow the country to carry out increasingly more complex missions in the future, several years down the road. Basically, this means that the F-16s are a long-term commitment toward building a stronger Ukrainian Air Force, even past the current conflict the country finds itself in. But when will this endeavor officially begin? Despite rumors circulating in December 2023, Ukraine still hasn't received a single F-16 fighter jet. However, this is bound to change very soon, in June or July 2024. Depending on when you're watching this video, Ukraine might have already received these jets and set off on the path toward air superiority. Interestingly, though the arrival of the F-16 jets is imminent, it's still not clear who will actually supply them. This probably has to do with the looming fear that Russia might interfere with the delivery process or even exact revenge against the sender. So for now, all we can do is speculate. Many experts believe that the first batch of F-16s will arrive from the Netherlands. After all, the country's Prime Minister Mark Rutte said that the Dutch government started preparing an initial shipment of 18 jets in December 2023. After the initial shipment, the country would send another 6 jets, as its total number of promised jets is 24. Denmark is another strong contender, as the country pledged to deliver 6 jets by the end of 2023. Obviously, this didn't happen. However, according to some reports, the deadline was pushed back by some 6 months, which would make the new delivery date sometime around June. These 6 jets would also be just the beginning, as Denmark pledged to send 19 F-16s in total. Belgium has also promised F-16 jets to Ukraine, but these likely won't arrive before 2025. Norway also has plans to send up to 10 F-16s to Ukraine, but the country hasn't discussed any fixed delivery schedule. As you can see, the list is missing one crucial country, which coincidentally manufactures these aircraft: the US. Though the US promised to approve any transfer of F-16s to Ukraine, the country didn't pledge to give these aircraft directly. The US has likely chosen to go through partner countries in Europe in an effort to reduce direct confrontation with Russia. After all, the US is widely believed to be the country's #1 enemy by a margin. However, the US will still be heavily involved in these transfers, beyond just giving them the okay. Together with several European countries, it will supply the hardware like munitions and additional equipment, make its jets and instructors available for training, and conduct this training on its soil. The other countries involved in this coalition include Canada, France, Greece, Luxembourg, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Sweden, and the UK. Let's say Ukraine does manage to achieve air superiority with the help of these countries. This outcome raises another important question: will air superiority be enough for Ukraine to win the war? Though Ukraine seems to think so, military experts aren't as sure. While no one can deny the strategic value of air superiority, victory in a war typically requires a much more extensive combination of factors, and in this case, most of these factors favor Russia. But what do you think? Do you believe the F-16s have the power to change the course of the Russo-Ukrainian war? If not, are they at least enough to guarantee Ukrainian air supremacy, or are we looking at a more favorable air situation at best? And what do you think Russia's reaction will be to the imminent arrival of the F-16s to Ukraine? Will this move only ramp up tensions, or do you see a more significant escalation happening in the future? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Now go and check out why Putin dreads the F-16, or click this other video instead.